Hi, everyone. I'm Dana Schaefer. I'm the Deputy Director of the American Historical Association. I'm pleased to welcome all of you. We're going to give a couple more minutes just to let a few people to arrive, and then we'll get started. Hi, everybody. I'm so glad that you're all here today. Again, I'm Dana Schaefer. I'm the Deputy Director of the American Historical Association and the project director for the AHA Grants to sustain and advance the work of historical organizations program. Today, I'm joined by a few of my colleagues, Liesl Greider, who's our webinar assistant, Liz Townsend, who will be managing technical assistance for the applications, and Jim Grossman, AHA's executive director. Let me first begin by going over the agenda for the hour. So I'll start with a brief introduction to the AHA. We hope you know who we are already, but you might not. Then we'll provide an overview of the grants program, getting a little more into detail about eligibility and criteria. Then Liz will cover a bit about how to submit an application. And then we'll actually leave most of the time for this webinar for Q&A. And so we ask that you put those in the chat function of the webinar put those in the Q&A section of the webinar, not the chat function, the Q&A. And feel free to put questions in as you think of them, and we will get to them after our presentation. And anything that we don't get to, we will respond via email next week and try to get back with any answers we don't get to. Also, we're recording this webinar, and we are going to post this on our website as soon as we can get it posted. So if you have questions about it and want to refer to it, it'll be available for you. Same with the slide deck that we're going to show. So don't feel like you have to scramble to take notes. We will, the slide deck will be available as well. Okay, so a little bit about the AHA. We were founded in 1884 and incorporated by Congress in 1889 for the promotion of historical studies. And we provide leadership for the discipline and promote the critical role of historical thinking in public life. We defend academic freedom, develop professional standards, support innovative scholarship and teaching, and help to sustain and enhance the work of historians. We are here for historians. We have about 11,500 individual members and 550 institutional members. And all of the work we do is by volunteers on committees and our council and 21 staff. We are not a very large staff, so we can do a lot with a few. Okay. Now about the SHARP program, as many of you have heard, it's our grant program is supported by the National Endowment for the Humanities, an independent federal agency. And the American Historical Association is one of 7 programs that have been funded. You can see the list of programs here on this slide. I mention this because I encourage you to visit the website at the bottom. It's the NEH site for these organizational grants. And it's very possible that your organizations might fit into some of these other programs. So take a look, that's where they're all listed. Each of them has their own individual website, but that website listed at the bottom of the slide is a clearinghouse for it and could be very helpful for you. Okay, an overview. So our grant to sustain and advance the work of historical organizations, it's $2.5 million funding program for small history-related organizations, which were adversely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic. And our program really supports 2 different kinds of activities and initiatives. First is support for activities that address problems that were created by the pandemic. And the second is support for new initiatives, so that would have resulted from opportunities that have arisen because of the pandemic. So we think of these things in 2 sort of buckets. And the purpose of it is really to mobilize public resources for what we like to do, which is the promotion of historical work, historical thinking, and for the presence of history in public life. So why are we doing this? Well, we're aware that, like the AHA, there are organizations and departments which promote the work of historians and which haven't been able to tap into the NEH funding because they're small and don't have the kinds of resources. And too often organizations are part of someone else's grant. And what we want to do is provide an opportunity for those institutions to really determine their own agendas and through the application of our grants. So we're anticipating that we'll be awarding around 64 or 65 grants. The range will be from $10,000 to $75,000. And our grant period is for 1 year. So your projects or initiatives can start as early as April 1st of 2022. But they must conclude by July 31st of 2023. And I've gotten some questions about this already. I want to clarify that the project or program or initiative that you're proposing, it can actually go longer than this. It can extend beyond the grant period. But I just want to be clear that the funding itself is for only 1 year maximum. The other eligibility requirements we have are that organizations must have annual budgets of $750,000 or less and fall into one of 3 categories: membership associations, site or location-based institutions, and these include online entities. So it's possible that your organization might not actually have a brick and mortar location, but you would fit into the site or location-based category. And then the third category is history and humanities departments at historically Black and tribally controlled colleges and universities. So we've received some questions about organizations which fall into more than one category. And since there will be separate review committees for each of these categories, we are encouraging applicants to submit an application to all applicable categories. So you'll submit, if you are both a membership organization and a site-based location, we would say submit the same application to both committees, and our review committees will discuss them individually. We will say you can't receive grants in both categories, but you can apply in both categories. We've also received some questions about organizational budgets and how that pertains to larger entities, universities, for example, which obviously will have larger overall budgets than $750,000. In this sense, we're really considering funding for the department, unit, or program, however you're defining it, not the entire university as a whole. So in most cases, the units would qualify. I do want to stress that if you're not sure about your eligibility, please do contact us before submitting an application. We don't want you to go to all the trouble to submit it only to find that it isn't eligible. So please do contact us. The best way to get in touch with us is via email. It's very simple, awards@historians.org. And we'll put that on the screen in a little bit in one of our subsequent slides. Okay, so the next part of eligibility that we've been getting a number of questions about is regarding the ARP funding. And I'm going to read the slide verbatim. Organizations that received American Rescue Plan funds directly from the NEH through what is known as the American Rescue Plan Humanities Organizations Program are not eligible for this award. You would know if you received this particular funding. The announcements for these funds came out right about the same time that our grants were announced. However, many of you might have received ARP funding through your state humanities councils, or previously through the CARES Act funding through the NEH, those are fine. You are eligible as long as there's not overlap between the projects or activities. So it's possible that you can have one project that's funded by CARES funding, that's funded through your state humanities councils, and that another portion of that project can be funded through this grant program. We just need to make sure that there's no overlap. But simply because you have received ARP funding does not make you ineligible. Okay, to criteria now. As I mentioned, we have 3 review committees that will be analyzing and reviewing applications in those 3 separate categories. And they're going to be determining really how effectively the proposed initiatives address the goals of our grant program, whether an applicant can implement and learn from the proposed activities, and whether the specified plan of action is likely to lead to sustainable institutional change. And I want to remind everybody that all proposals must include an explanation of how COVID-19 has generated challenges or opportunities to be addressed by the proposed initiative. That's directly from the NEH, and it's why we have this funding. So a few of the criteria that our review committees are going to be looking at is first, how does your application address the effects of the COVID pandemic? So how well do the proposed activities address the challenges created by the pandemic? Are they likely to enable the organizations to recover from the impact of COVID, either financial or otherwise? The second is the impact and sustainability of the proposed program. So how effectively will this grant enhance the applicant's ability to promote historical work, historical thinking, and or the presence of history in public life to its constituencies? Does the program make a strong case for the significance of the organization's work going forward? What's the likelihood of new approaches and new ways of thinking emerging as a result, as they relate to the organization's mission and constituency? How effectively will the proposed activities enhance the ability of the grantee to do historical work that contributes to the interests of underserved populations? Those kinds of questions. And then finally is the ability of the applicant to implement the proposal. Does the organization have a capacity to do what it proposes with the additional resources that the grant provides? It's really what we want to know. Has the applicant explained clearly the current institutional situation, giving contextual issues and maybe what your peer organizations are doing, a relevant funding environment? Also, if organizations, we want to know about your experience related to the activity. Maybe this is something you've been doing for years, or maybe this is something you've never tried before. We need to know how this plan, if it's something new, is there an opportunity for professional development for your staff who are going to be working on this? Those kinds of things. And then finally, is the budget realistic? Are the proposed activities feasible within the budget? So these are just some of the criteria I want to mention that the review committee will be considering, and it isn't inclusive, so it's just meant to be a guide. Now I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Liz, who will talk about how to submit an application.
All right, hello everybody. I can help you with any technical support, so I'll just kind of run through what you'll see on your screen when you go into apply. The first thing to do is to create a free account at historians.org/create-account, or if you are a member or have been a member, you already have an account. And also, if you ever have any trouble with any of this, the awards@historians.org is the good email to reach me as well. AHA membership is not required to apply for or receive a grant, so you don't need to worry about that at all. And this is the screen you'll see with Create Account. It just asks for some quick details, and then your account is created. so after you create the account and you're ready to submit it, you don't need to do this ahead of time. You would log into your account. So I just have a test account here. That's not, and you'll go down to this awards, grants, and jobs section. And I have it in the box. There's the available application forms link that you'll go to. If you look at underneath that link is my submitted applications. Once you submit an application, you can go to that link and you'll see it there. You can re-upload something. And if you want to say you think you made, once you upload it, you think you made a mistake, you can re-upload a new one and then just contact me and I can delete the old one. So you won't be able to delete an old one, but you can put in a new document if you think you made a mistake. Once you click the application form, you'll see a list of all the applications we have right now. So you'll want to find the appropriate grant. So there's the one for membership associations, HBCUs, site and location, and then you just click this apply button there. Once you click that, you will go to basically at the top of this page, it has your contact information, which should come over from what you did in your account. There's a couple of questions like, what's the full name of your organization, just so we have that there. And then the supporting documents section, which Dana will go over more specifics. This is a quick rundown of what we'd like. We'd like it all in a single PDF. That's the easiest way for the review committee to scroll through it. Obviously, if something happens and you can't do that, it is okay, but it's much easier if you can put this all in one PDF. Once you have that, right, so again, this is basically, once you complete the application, you can't redo the application, but you can re-upload things. So you would choose your file and then just skip this letters of recommendation. We don't need that, just the document, and then hit complete application. And that's all you need to do. And here is Dana again with information about what's in that packet.
Please note on the slide, our application deadline is December 14th. So you have a little bit of time. But the application packet, as Liz said, we'd like it combined in one packet, and it will be inclusive of the following things. So first is an application cover sheet. That is a form that we have on our website that you'll need to download and complete. It's got pretty basic information asked for on that form. One thing I want to highlight is that the federal government requires that applicants have what is called a DUNS number, or a unique entity identifier. We have instructions on our website about how to apply for one of those if you don't already have one. My understanding is that it takes a few days to get that number. But so I would, if you don't have one, I'd go ahead and do it so that you can put that into your cover sheet application. The second portion is the narrative. This is the meat of your application, and it'll be about 3 to 6 pages total. And that really depends on, the length depends on the size of the grant that you're asking for. We're anticipating that smaller grant proposals will be shorter. So the first section of the narrative is a summary statement, and that's 1 page. And in that, and then secondly is that impact of COVID-19, which will be about 1 to 2 pages. That's what we talked about. Everyone has to show how they've been affected by COVID. And then the third portion of that narrative is the description of the project. That's going to be your longest portion of this section, and about 1 to 3 pages. Then we're asking for a work plan, and this should include a timeline of the approximate dates or milestones within the project. It should reflect the major activities that are described in your narrative and the project dates. That should be about a page. Then we'd also like resumes or bios of key personnel, and those should be no longer than 2 pages each. It should also include the head of your organization, any project staff who will be managing the project, and any other principal staff who will be involved. Then we've got the project budget. we have a downloadable template in Excel on our website. I want to stress that you do not have to use all of the categories in that budget template. It's meant to be a guide, and you're able to insert rows and columns and things like that, whatever makes it work for you. But we've put in the basic kind of allowable costs for this grant, and hope that you find it helpful. If you have questions about that, please do shoot us an email at awards@historians.org, and we can help you with that. Please also make sure that you read carefully the unallowable expenses. We can't support anything that the NEH has said is unallowable. And the full list of unallowable expenses is on our website as well. But for some of those are, for example, no travel, domestic or foreign, is allowed. And then no more than 20% of your total project costs can be for equipment. And then we'd like a project budget justification. That'll be about 1 to 2 pages. And in that, you'll provide information that shows how you're supporting your budget. So it must specifically describe how your costs have been calculated. If there are any quotes or things like that, you'll need to let us know how you got that, and how each of those items will support the proposed objectives in your proposal. And you'll need to explain any exclusions that are applied to your indirect cost calculation, if you choose to do that. And that gets to the next one, which is indirect costs. And some of you may have negotiated agreements, federally negotiated agreements, and that's great. If you do have that, we ask that you include a copy of that agreement in your application if you are planning to claim indirect costs. And if you are not, then you don't have to include that. If you do not have a negotiated rate, you can claim up to 10% in indirect costs. And that's it for the application. So now we've got some time. We've got about 35 minutes to answer any of your questions, and Jim and Liz and I are happy to do that. So actually, why don't you pull up the last slide that just has our contact information so folks can write that down if they want. This is the historians.org/sharp-grants. That's where you can find all the details. That's where we're going to put this webinar and all of the other resources I talked about. And then there's that address again for you, awards@historians.org, if you have questions.
So Dana, I've started answering as they went along. I answered some of the easy questions already in the Q&A. But we can work down some of them. Some of them I think I didn't answer, in part because you and I might need to answer them in conversation on the fly. Can you give specific examples for all 3 types of organizations? So one is very easy. HBCUs and tribal colleges and universities, I believe, are all identified formally with that designation. If I'm wrong, someone should let me know. And if there are any gray areas, we're happy to discuss those on an individual basis. Dana, you want to do the other 2, the associations, which is straightforward, and the site-based, which is not?
Right. Membership associations, those are your traditionally defined nonprofits that are governed by membership. So it means that, technically it means that in your bylaws, you've got a voting membership that votes for a board or a governing council, something like that. And there are a number of them, like the Southern Historical Association, or the Society for History of the Gilded Age, those kinds of organizations, as long as their budgets are under 750,000 would qualify.
Dana, on
yeah.
that, so you do need 50C3 designation, 503C designation, correct?
Yes. So this is also on our website. You have to either be a 501c3, an accredited public, or 501c3 institution of higher education, state and local government agencies, or federally recognized Native American tribal governments. All of those are qualified organizations.
Depending on the category.
Depending on the category, right.
The associations, then, if you're not a 501c3 and you're an association, you probably can't apply. You should be a 501c3.
That's correct.
So then the other one, the site-based, that's the one that's a little more complicated.
Right. I mean, it could be some of them are the more traditional ones that you think of, like a museum or historic site, or these are the brick and mortar type places that I was mentioning. But you might have a small organization that runs a publication or does oral history for a specific community, but doesn't actually live in any specific site place. And those kinds of organizations would also be eligible. Our intent really is to try to make this as broad as possible. So.
Okay, next. Proposals for less than $10,000. What do we think?
No.
Okay, there's your answer.
Sorry.
Next, can organizations apply for a grant together? We have had conversations about collaboration. So do you want to?
Yes, I don't see any reason why not, as long as both of those organizations fit into the categories, the eligible categories. That should be fine.
As long as we're talking about that, there's also a question about whether collaborative projects are given more weight. I would say that's and we might end up disagreeing here. I would say that is a question that will emerge during conversations among the review panels. And it's entirely possible that a good, strong collaboration might well be stronger than a single proposal. 1 + 1 often equals 3. But sometimes collaboration, it's hard to make the case that this is a good collaboration. So I would say it probably depends on the proposal itself, but that there certainly is potential for collaborative projects to be stronger. I would also say that given the way we've thought about this, collaborations across our categories are likely to generate strong proposals. And we will figure out how to deal with them. Well, we would love to see a tribal college collaborating with a small history organization, for example, to provide opportunities for students. Sure, that would work very well. So, Dana, do you have thoughts?
Yeah, I think that's how I would answer. I think that sounds reasonable. Yeah. Yeah.
We are a corporate museum inside a large nonprofit. Our department budget is less than the limit. Okay, this is pretty straightforward, and I think we have discussed this. A unit with a budget that fits our criteria, that is within a large nonprofit organization, that the budget is larger than our criteria. I believe we decided that that is not eligible, except in the tribal college and HBCU category.
Right. In the case of like a university, it would be. But
in the case of a university, that is a tribal college,
right,
or an HBCU.
Right.
So no, if you're a department in a museum, sure, your budget's likely to be under $750,000. But quite frankly, that would make a department of the Metropolitan Museum of Art or the largest history museum in the country eligible. So no, your institutional budget must be under 750. except in the HBCU and tribal college categories.
Right.
We expect to provide 65 grants. How competitive do you expect the award to be? We have no idea.
Yeah. I mean, I think we have around 200 attendees at this webinar.
I think.
It's really hard to know. We hope it's competitive.
And you don't. We hope it is. You hope it's not.
Yeah.
If this were live, we could look around the room and say, look to your left, look to your right. But we really have no idea how many applicants there will be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I asked, I spoke with some of the humanities councils about their grants, which were similar to ours, but slightly different. And, it really ran the gamut. They had 60 people at a webinar and had 50 organizations apply. And so it's really hard to say, but my sense is that there is a lot of interest in this, so.
Uncertainties about budget, can we ask about it ahead of time? In other words, can you go over our proposed budgets with us? We're happy to be as helpful as we can. Mm-hmm. That said, Dana is one person who has a little bit of help. I am another person who has a little bit less help. We will do the best we can. I would say that we are more likely to be able to answer budget questions that are sort of general budget questions. I don't know that we have the capacity to review your budget with you. Dana, you're on the front line on this.
I am. If I have time, yes. I mean, we want to be as helpful as we can. I would recommend that if you do have questions, don't wait until December 13th, because I might not get back to you. I would do it much farther in advance. We've got about a month, a little more than a month. And so I as proactive as you can be about this, the better. And I will answer questions as best I can. And oftentimes, I've gotten a lot of emails about these so far, and some of them I don't know the answer to and have to inquire at the NEH, and then they get back to me. So that takes a little bit of time. So yes, please do send in questions, but don't wait till the last minute.
Indirect costs. If you already have an indirect cost ratio negotiated with any federal agency, you are free to use it. You also can choose to use only a portion of it. In other words, if your indirect cost ratio is 28%, and in terms of the grant money, that the way you want to use it or whatever, and you want to forego half, you can do that. But if you have a negotiated cost of 28%, you are entitled to include that in your budget. If you do not have a currently negotiated indirect cost, you can ask for as much as 10%. Dana, do you have anything to add to that?
No, that's about it.
Mm-hmm. Is there any guidance on how much we should ask for based on our annual operating budget? A question I had not thought about. Mm-hmm. Probably not. It's the project, not your budget.
Right.
We don't mind if you're a small organization and want a large grant. The only thing there I can say, based on previous experience on review panels, is that if your annual budget right now is $50,000 and you ask for 75, somebody on a review panel is going to ask whether you have the capacity to do something that large if you are that small. It might well be that you can, but I think in general, if your request is a large amount in proportion to your budget, think hard about making the case. And the case is, yes, we're small, but we're capable and we can do this. That would be, but there is no hard and fast rule. Travel restriction. Dana, do we have a travel restriction?
Yeah, I can explain this. So travel costs specifically are not allowed. So you can't pay for airfare or train fare or things like that. And that's really a reflection of where the NEH is right now. The NEH is not allowing their staff to travel. However, I did confirm this with NEH that say your project is a conference and you have speakers that are coming, you can pay those speakers a stipend. And if they use that for travel, you know, that's not part of your budget. So I would say that you can use it, you can pay stipends, but not travel.
Okay, I'm typing an answer right now. Historians, have we anticipated specific types of grant requests that will be rewarded? Oh, not rewarded, awarded. Just looking for some examples. You know, we didn't put examples in there because we don't want anybody to think that something is what we're looking for. But I think there are lots of possible examples. We all know that if it's, and I apologize because associations is what I know best right now. We all know that associations are in the middle of struggling with what an annual meeting is. And we can imagine associations might be applying for grants to say, we need to try something new because the model for our annual meeting or for our journal or for our structure has just gone down the tubes. And we have some ideas and we would like to try them. So that's possible. Another possibility is we're a small, struggling organization. We can't afford to pay for an executive director. We have all volunteers and we need to rethink what we do. But to rethink what we do, we need a year of someone who gets paid to be in charge. Okay.
Strategic planning.
HBCUs and TCCUs, we're expecting applications, for example, that talk about maybe collaboration with local organizations, with associations, opportunities for your students, new opportunities that your students haven't had before. We're imagining ways of thinking about how your history department can increase its enrollments, for example, because we know that enrollments at many institutions have crashed during COVID. Dana, do you have some other you want to throw out?
Yeah, I just mentioned like strategic planning, operational costs, those kinds of things would be fine. Yeah, I mean, I think the sky's the limit. There's a question on here about a project that would work with a department and objects, some art related objects, historical focused objects, using those in the classroom. That would be an eligible project, I think.
Not only is that an eligible project, but I encourage you, Dana, do we have our Teaching Things project on our website?
I think it's on there, not in great detail, but yes, we've made the announcement. It's on our website.
If you Google American Historical Association Teaching Things, what you'll find is that we actually just got a grant from the NEH for a project relating to teaching with material culture. And we would be happy to talk to you about that, actually. Let's keep looking here.
Here's one. An organization, it's a membership organization that includes a lot of non-American scholars. And one of their goals is to increase representation of scholars, especially emerging scholars in certain global areas. And so I don't think that presents any problems for eligibility. I just want to say that we are not allowed to fund non-US citizens, and we are not allowed to fund foreign entities. So those two things you need to keep in mind.
A unit within a university, whether it's public or private, is unlikely to be eligible. Again, except for the tribal college and HBCU program. I don't care. We even if your budget is $20,000. If you're in a university with a multi-million-dollar budget, we cannot fund you. And that's, I apologize for that, but quite frankly, this is meant to help organizations that are small and struggling.
However, I want to point out that the American Council of Learned Societies, one of the other grantees, is funding university units specifically,
Right.
publicly engaged programs. So I would definitely check out their website. Because it sounds like that particular program could be eligible for an ACLS grant.
And quite frankly, it's entirely possible that the NEH had this in mind when they gave out the grants overall, that these are complementary, that ACLS is basically helping people that we're not, and we're helping people that they're not.
Right.
Indirect costs. Often there are some expenses that cannot be considered within indirect costs, but I think in this case, just about everything is eligible. Am I right, Dana? That
Yes,
there are no excluded costs.
I asked that specifically, and because on our grant to the NEH, our proposal to the NEH had very specific, but it's unlimited for these grants to us.
Impact of COVID. That's a really good question. I would say that you shouldn't be narrow-minded. The impacts of COVID are wide, broad, often impossible to define very narrowly. And I think that we all know that the environments in which we live and work have been affected by various things relating to COVID, which have to do with the economy, which have to do with public health. I think you just need to demonstrate that the last year and a half have been a challenge. That challenge has something to do with COVID, and you have a good idea as to how to move forward. Dana, does that comport with your?
Yeah.
HSIs, it's not HSIs are not within our category. It's HBCUs and tribal colleges and universities.
Right.
The two local nonprofits may well be eligible to apply for our funds to work with you on the project that you're thinking about, but you're probably not eligible.
We have a question here about a match requirement. There are none. You don't have to have a match. Is there any coordination between applying for our grants and the ARP Act grants? I will say that we are coordinating with all of the other humanities grant making organizations, so that if you apply for one of our grants, that also, and you might also be applying to the ACLS or SSRC or something like that, we are coordinating so that you will not receive both grants. But I guess I think that's your question. If not, email me.
Think of it this way also, you can't double dip, but you can maximize your possibilities.
Right.
Employee, couple questions about staffing. Yes, you can use our grant for staffing. Absolutely. We expect many people will say, this is what we want to do, but we don't have anybody around here who knows how to do it. That's what this is for. Whether, Dana, you can answer perhaps, can someone employ a non-US citizen as part of this grant?
No, I mean, they can't be paid, the person's payment who is a non-US citizen cannot come from the grant. If they're working on this project, their portion can't come from the grant. Does that make sense?
In other words, you can't use our money to pay a non-US citizen.
Exactly. That was better, much better said, Jim.
Can you let us know which other grantors we're cooperating? We're not coordinating. I don't think we're coordinating with anybody. We're talking to others, right?
Yeah. Just as I said, if someone asks me about a grant that doesn't really fit ours, but might fit the National Writers Project, I would let them know, and vice versa. And then at the end of the process, once the grants have been selected, we're coordinating simply to make sure that no one has received grants from multiple programs.
We're counting on your help for that, to be honest. If you apply for money from us and you hear that that project has been funded by somebody else, you get notified by somebody else first, please let us know, because we can give that money to somebody else. So when we say you can't get money for the same project twice, it's not just that we're coordinating, we're expecting all of our applicants, if they're applying to someone else, to let us know if someone else gave them the money. It's not honor system because we'd find out eventually, but the sooner you tell us, the better we can give the money to someone else.
Yeah, there is a question on our cover sheet asking whether or not you are planning to or have applied to one of the 6 other organizational grants. It's just a yes or no, and that doesn't have any effect on your rating or ranking or anything like that. It's just a way for us to know.
Are there any others that are still open?
I think we've answered.
Have we answered everybody? Aha. Now there's a new one. You have to apply to multiple. Absolutely. Apply to everybody you possibly can imagine who might have money that you're eligible for. But you can't pay, you can't pay the same expenses out of 2 grants. And so if you've given us a proposal and you've given one to somebody else and they fund it before you hear from us, please tell us. Does that? How broad can the project be? What a wonderful question. How imaginative do you want to be? I would say, personal opinion here, that if it's really, really, really broad, you're going to have to write a damn good proposal to make the case you can pull it off in a year.
And in 6 pages, that's not a whole lot.
What is the makeup of the review panel? We haven't chosen them yet, but the review panels will be people who are knowledgeable about the constituency category under consideration. They will have a diversity of perspectives, diversity of experience. It's obviously, in a small review panel, you cannot check every single possible category of expertise and experience, but we will do our best. But you can be sure that each of the review panels will have people knowledgeable about a wide variety of aspects of the work that is done in the organizations being considered.
And there will be 5 panelists on each review committee, just if that's helpful.
We're getting more here.
Yeah. Can you request to fund, for example, a conference? Sorry, I just scrolled up on my. Can you request to fund a conference and for staffing that is only tangentially related to the conference? Yes, and what you can do is fund a portion. So for example, if you have a staff person who maybe 10% of their full-time job is working on this conference, you can apply 10% of their salary to the grant, 10% of their salary and benefits. So you would just need to explain that in your budget justification. In fact, that will likely happen a large part of the time if someone is only using a portion of their time for your particular project. That's fine.
Yes, this is the only deadline. No, there will not be new funds. As much as I wish they were, call your congressman.
Each application takes a lot of time, so it's helpful to know which other funders we should avoid if applying.
Don't avoid anybody. Don't avoid anybody.
Well, I think, again, I would go to that, that NEH. Liesl, can you pull that slide up again? It's the one that lists all of the 7 organizational grantors. They're very different projects. So you're gonna find, I think a quick review of that one page will let you know what you're eligible for. Some of them are more humanities focused. Ours are history focused. Some of them are writing focused. Some of the, I think if you take a look at that list of 7 organizations, you'll see.
NEH Cares funding is not related to the, you can have money from NEH Cares and still apply to us. That's not a problem at all.
That's right.
Spent or encumbered inside of grant period. Dana, the money must be spent inside the grant period, correct?
Correct. Thanks, Liesl. Everybody, this is the site to check out.
Collaborative projects with different facets apply for funding. I don't see why, if you have projects with different facets, why we can't fund part of it and somebody else can fund part of something else.
Yes, that's a perfectly acceptable way to do it.
Perfectly reasonable. Physical infrastructure. I think we're not doing that. Am I right, Dana?
That is one of the ineligible expenses. It says construction, purchase of real property, major alterations or renovations that is not allowed.
Anytime
That's what you mean. Yeah.
Anytime you hear one of us speaking in that bureaucratic voice, you'll know it's NEH rules, not ours.
Right. You can purchase equipment, and this is actually an important distinction. NEH defines equipment as anything that's $5,000 or more. So you can't purchase equipment more than 20% of the total project costs. However, if you're purchasing a printer or things that are less than $5,000 can be considered office supplies or materials. So keep that in mind.
We are big on home. Yeah, it might be good to focus on the history side of things. This is someone asking about an exhibit with a public history collaboration with community partners. You've got to make the case, that's fine, that's within this program, but you've got to make the case that you are promoting historical work, that the work that you're doing is historical, that the quality of the historical work meets a high standard, and that you're contributing to the ability of history and historians to benefit civic culture. But you've got to make it clear this is a historical project. We are here to fund historical work. Examples may sound like they may be only tangentially related to COVID. I'm not sure that those examples were. You have to make the connection. The connection could be creative, but you've got to make the connection. You've got to demonstrate that you've got a problem that somehow relates to things that happened in the last year and a half that are part of what this country went through because of COVID.
Improving lighting and exhibition space open to the public, for example.
You know, that's tough. That may be a tough case to make.
Yeah, but it seems to me that might fit under their construction property, those alterations, those kinds of things. But you know what? Let me check on that. Because I don't want to tell you absolutely not and then find out that that's acceptable. I'm going to look into that and I will get back to you.
And I'm sorry if some of our answers are vague. We're doing our best on these. In some cases, we are dependent on arcane NEH rules. Part of the point of this program is trying to provide opportunities for organizations that don't have a lot of experience with the NEH, and we have a smaller bureaucracy or none at all. Could you explain again the ways in which you could still apply even if you did receive some NEH money? Sure. If you've had an NEH grant under their standard grant programs, you are perfectly eligible to apply for money under this program. NEH Cares, which was special money. The only disqualifier is the NEH American Relief Plan funds in specific categories that Dana would know better than I.
I was like, yeah, it's the program. Let's see, I want to read it specifically to you. It's the Humanities Organizations Program funded through the ARP. And I think there were about 230 of those. If you received that grant, you would know. If you received ARP funding through your state humanities council, if you received other funding through the NEH, you are still eligible. It's just that humanities organizations program that would disqualify you.
Could this be used to establish a book award for self-published works rather than university-based publications? Technically, yes, but quite frankly, I'm guessing that that would not be a terribly competitive proposal. And it's not self-published versus university-based. I just doubt that in a competitive process, a book award would.
Yes, and it's questionable, Jim, whether that would even qualify, because one of the things that grantees are not allowed to do is to issue competitive regrants. So that could also be the same thing for prizes. I mean, you basically can't take our money and give it away as a grant from your organization. So question is, what plan for material culture folklore exhibit that has changed as a result of the pandemic, i.e. the need for bilingual script? Certainly.
Yeah.
That would definitely qualify.
Yeah.
If a printer or computer is under $5,000, it can be listed as supplies or materials instead of equipment. Yes.
University-based center? No, unless it is a tribal college or an HBCU.
Right. But again, ACLS is focusing on university-based, so I would go to their website and see if you qualify for theirs. Could this be used to augment a program, such as a diverse settlers annual program that has been postponed due to COVID and used to transcribe past lectures and video to be posted on a website of our organization? Yes, that's a very good example of an eligible project. Is there an element of the request that you would not fund?
Well,
can AHA approve the project but deny one aspect that's not allowed?
Wow, a line item veto. Ronald Reagan would be very happy with that question. That's a really we hadn't thought about that. Probably not. I don't think we're going to start getting into the weeds of a line item veto on budgets.
Right.
But I don't know, Dana.
No, I agree with you, Jim, and I think that this is all the more case to get in touch with us in advance, so that we can look at this and say, hey, your project looks really good, but we can't fund X or we can't fund Y. So take that out. And
what you could do there to get a quick answer, instead of giving us the weeds of a budget, if you send us an email ASAP and say, we'd like to do the following 6 things. Are any of these out out of eligibility. And we can say, yeah, this one doesn't, well, yeah, this one's not going to fly.
Okay, well, it's 2:01 and it looks like we've answered all the questions in the Q&A. So I want to thank everyone for coming. I hope to hear from you and look forward to your applications. Please reach out to us with questions. Again, it's awards@historians.org, or check out our website, historians.org/sharp-grants.
And I'm also going to throw in a commercial announcement. I hope nobody minds while we have the floor. We strongly encourage everybody to come to our annual meeting in New Orleans, January 5th through 8th or 6th through 9th, I can't recall. Those of you who are within shouting distance of New Orleans and who can shout loud, we are trying to get an arrangement for discounted parking, where you would be able to leave your car for the full 4 days without paying an outrageous hotel parking fee. And we are hoping that there are historians and people interested in history who live within 400 or 500 miles of New Orleans who've never been to one of our meetings, who might be interested in coming. We will have a vaccination requirement, so you can assume everybody who is attending the conference will be vaccinated.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.